How many of y'all are teachers?
Assistant teacher.
You're assistant teacher,
Yeah.
special ed? What are you helping with?
First grade.
First grade. Oh, special place in heaven for you. Well, thank you guys for coming. My name's David Bullard. I teach several subjects at Denison High School. I teach U.S. History to juniors, AP U.S. History to juniors, and AP Government to juniors. And I've been there for 13 years now, teaching at that level. And so it's been a journey, to say the least. What I wanted to talk about today was your rights and your freedoms within the classroom. And there are a great deal of misconceptions about what happens to your freedoms when you enter into a school. And I've done a lot of studying on this and really looking into it because I wanted to pay attention and know that what I'm doing in the classroom is right. And so I started looking into some things with it. And the first thing I had to study was our First Amendment rights. And some of y'all were here for the speech the other night where I talked about the First Amendment. Can anybody name for me the 5 freedoms listed in the First Amendment?
Yes.
You didn't know there was going to be a pop quiz, did you? Very good. Religion, speech, assembly, press, and petition, right? Now, I will tell you, I will no longer teach it as religion in the First Amendment ever again. Because what I have found over time is that when you say religion, people have odd ideas. And when you say religion, people immediately begin to think of worship. And you've even heard your politicians recently state that we're not taking away your freedom to worship. Well, I can tell you the First Amendment does not talk about your freedom to worship. It talks about the whole gamut of religious conscience. And so here it is. Listen to what it says. It says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, nor shall it prohibit the free exercise thereof. That's something key to remember. Now, the freedom of religion is talking about 2 clauses there. One would be the establishment clause, and the other one would be the free exercise clause. Now, how has the establishment clause been interpreted over time? Since we're a small group, just talk to me. Can you tell me how people have been interpreting since 1946 the establishment clause of the First Amendment?
Separation between church and state.
Very good. I knew it'd come up. Anybody know the idea behind that term, where it originated from?
A letter from Thomas Jefferson.
Very good. It was a letter from Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist Church in 1801. And the Danbury Baptist Church wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson and said, we're worried about you. We don't know. You're a wild card. Are you going to interfere with our religious business and start telling us what to do? And Thomas Jefferson's reply is essential to understand that he did not just say there is a permanent wall of separation between church and state. That's not at all what he said. That is one line mentioned in it. And when they do that now in modern America, they bring that out of context. You have to read it in context. And so what Thomas Jefferson said was, we will not allow the government to interfere with religious institutions. See, the prohibition is not on people, is it? The prohibition in the letter to Danbury Baptist Church and the establishment clause puts the burden on Congress, the government body, to say, no, we will not interfere with your religious institutions. That's the idea behind the establishment clause. So when that happens, when did things begin to change? Well, in 1946, there was a court case called Everson versus the Board of Education. That was in 1946. That's the first time that anybody had ever invoked the idea of separation of church and state. And if you go back and read the justices' opinions, and you have to read all 9 of the opinions to understand what was happening at the time, in that court case, Hugo Black, one of the Supreme Court justices, made a comment in there that a school that engaged in any kind of religious function would be violating the separation of church and state, mentioned by Thomas Jefferson. And so what happened is you turn the element around in that idea where, and Hugo Black even admitted in his opinion, that he was changing it from a government entity being restrained from religion to now you have a human element that is being restrained from being involved in the government. You see what he did? Hugo Black said, and he changed it and turned it on its end. He said now religion is not allowed anywhere in government, whereas before they were saying government is not allowed where? In religion. You see the difference? Key to understand. After that court case, a precedence gets set, and we see a string of court cases raining down. Let me give you some of those court cases. In 1962, there was a court case named Engel v. Vital. That court case says that you cannot have state officials cannot require school-wide prayer. Let me explain that court case to you. In 1962, there was a school that was requiring students to do two things. One, they were requiring them to recite a prayer over the announcement. Two, they were using prayer as a punishment for students and sending them to the corner of the room and making them pray. What the court ruled is not that you cannot pray in school. You need to understand this. What they were ruling is you cannot have state-led prayer. And I do this to my kids all the time. Can your students pray in school? Yes. I tell them the only way to remove prayer from school is to stop testing them. They can pray. Can they pray in Jesus' name? Yes. Can I pray in school? Yes. I can pray, do it all the time, I can promise you. I give kids by name and go through and pray for them because there are so many of these kids that are hurting out there. Why would we turn away from an opportunity to let God work? Now, can I force my kids to pray? The answer is no. But nowhere in that court case does it set a precedent that says no prayer in schools. You need to understand that. Can students pray at a football game? Yes. Can they pray at a graduation? Yes. And we need to understand that. There's a common misconception. When I first started teaching, there was a fellow teacher who I'm sure took exception to me and started arguing with me about this court case. And her interpretation of it was, your kids can't pray in school and you can't pray in school. And I invited her to please prove that to me. Because you and I have the right to pray. And we're going to talk about that for a second because you have rights. You don't abandon those rights when you walk into a classroom, do you? You don't abandon those rights when you walk into a schoolhouse or a football room or a locker room. See, there's nowhere in the Constitution that tells you your rights are good here, here, and here. Your freedoms are guaranteed by the Bill of Rights, and they are limitless. Now, there are some specific things that we can't do. Freedom of speech does not mean you can walk into a crowded room and shout fire. There are limits on it like that. But what I mean is the limitations to your freedoms are not placed by boundaries. Does that make sense? Okay. Next court case is Abington's Township School District versus Shemp. I always struggle with that name. That was in 1963, 1 year later. This is the court case that says you're not allowed to have state-sponsored Bible reading in school. Very important, the language of that. Listen to it again. You're not allowed to have state-sponsored Bible reading in school. What does that mean? It means that you are not allowed to use the Bible as a weapon. You are not allowed to tell a kid that for their punishment, which is what this school was doing, that you have to go to the corner and read this portion of the Bible. You can't force a student to read the Bible. Does that make sense? Now, can you have, and I got into an argument with a gentleman just today over this. Can you have a Bible on your desk? Yes, you absolutely, most certainly can. Can that Bible be opened? Matter of fact, it sure enough can. Can you read that Bible in class? Absolutely you can. Now there's tricky situations to that. I'm a history teacher. What is the Bible? It is documented history. All historians that I know of and have read of have acknowledged that the Bible is a biblical or a historically accurate document. It's a primary source. Why wouldn't we use it? Our Constitution was created on the principles of that Bible, 37 specific points. I can show you article by article where they drew the verses out for our Constitution. It's a remarkable document. Why do you think it's lasted as long as it has? Because these men knew what they were doing when they drafted this Constitution. They based it on the Bible and the person of Christ. I said this quote the other night. Listen to this. This is Noah Webster, one of the founders that wrote the Constitution and signed it. He said, "It is the sincere desire of this writer that our citizens should early understand that the correct source of genuine Republican principles is the Bible, or specifically the New Testament or the Christian religion." That's your founder that just said that. So we get our rights and our constitutional privileges from the Bible. So we can use it as in those terms. Can a student have a Bible at school? Can they read that Bible in school? Can they read that Bible out loud? Can they share Jesus to other students? I'm going to contend with you today. Your rights are under attack. Not too long ago, 2 years ago, I still have the recording of it. There was a teacher in Florida whose students in the 5th grade had what was called reading hour, where they could bring their favorite book to school and read. A young man brought his Bible, and the teacher took up the Bible, called his parents, and told him he was not allowed to bring that Bible to school, and he is not allowed to read that Bible at school. 2 months ago in Washington, excuse me, no, that's not right. That was in May in Washington. A young man, his mother used to send him scripture verses in his lunch. That's awesome, by the way. I love that. And he started sharing those Bible verses with the kids at his table. And before too long, he was passing those Bible verses around to other kids and sharing the Bible verses. That is an awesome young man. I want to meet him. But he started doing that, and a parent complained. The teacher did not call the student in. Instead, the principal, sent a sheriff to the parent's house to demand that the young man stop reading the Bible verses at school. Do you see what's happening in your country? I'm just giving you the tip of the iceberg. It's here. And if you think it just is happening in Oregon and Washington, I'm telling you now, it's here. Before too long, if you have any kids sharing, that's going to come to the forefront. And we have to be able to be prepared to battle those ideals. The other court case is called Lemon v. Kurtzman. That was in 1971. And Lemon v. Kurtzman violates a school from that's the wrong word. It says that a school is not allowed to use state money to pay for anything that is non-secular, whatever it is. That does not say that a school cannot have a Bible course or a Bible curriculum in their school. And I've checked with this in the master's programs that I'm working on. I've checked on this. And I've asked professors who have doctorates in this, could my school offer a course in Bible theology, in Christian historical theology? And the answer is yes. It just can't be a required course. You can't do it as core curriculum. And so there's a lot of misconceptions going on around there that are causing problems that people are misinterpreting. And when you hear them say those things, correct them. This is not true. And so you got to be able to look at those court cases and talk about that. Ronald Reagan, I love it when we're talking about prayer. Ronald Reagan said the Constitution did not prevent people from praying, but instead its declared purpose was to protect the right to pray. Does that make sense what he's saying? The Constitution doesn't tell us we cannot pray or read our Bible, doesn't tell us where we can practice our religion, doesn't tell us where we can adhere to our religious conscience, period. So, there's one other thing. Are y'all familiar with the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution? Anybody know it? No? Most people don't. Very few people can tell you the First Amendment. The 14th Amendment, I would argue, is probably the second most important amendment in the Constitution. And we're going to learn how to lean on the 14th Amendment in the coming days, I promise you. Here's what it says. The 14th Amendment says that if you are a citizen of a state, then you are hereby a citizen of the federal government of the United States, and all citizens born or naturalized in the United States are hereby granted equal protection of the law and the same due process of law. Now, what that means is that when you walk into your classroom, did you somehow give up your citizenship rights? When you walked in and took the oath of office to become a congressman or serve on a board of education or to serve anywhere in the community as a librarian, did you give up your First Amendment rights somehow? Did you waive them in any way? The reason why we know that is the 14th Amendment. If you had waived your rights, you would have been denied due process of law. Does that make sense? And due process means that you and I have the right to walk into a room and practice our religious conscience. Nobody has the right to take your rights away from you. Dwight D. Eisenhower said that the Bill of Rights contains no provision for it to cancel the Bill of Rights. There's no part of the Constitution that can cancel itself out. So if somebody is invoking the idea of establishment clause, in other words, they'll call it what? Separation of church and state. What they really mean is establishment clause. And they're telling you you can't practice your religion here because it violates establishment. What other part of the Constitution are they violating? Free exercise clause. It cannot do that. That is not a provision in the Constitution. So if they're telling you that you cannot practice your religion in the classroom, then they are also saying that you do not have the free exercise of religion in your classroom. Therefore, they would be canceling the Constitution out. Does that make sense to everybody? That is a constitutional principle of interpretation. Constitution has no way to cancel itself out. Now, why is this such a big deal? What is happening, do you think, in our classrooms where teachers are compromising their faith? In these areas of schools and classrooms, you're seeing it in the inner cities. You're not seeing it necessarily here in this area yet, but you're seeing it in the inner cities. I saw it when I went to Richmond today. It's wild what you see down there in those bigger cities. What are we doing when we walk into a classroom or walk into our school building and we set our faith aside in a nice little compartment box? What's happening? What are we doing to our schools? We're robbing them of the chance to see Jesus. Have y'all ever heard of, anybody know how big home plate is on a diamond? A baseball diamond? I heard a coach say this once. A home plate is 11 inches by 8.5. And then you have the point sticking off of it on the back. Now, if you were to play Little League Baseball, my daughter just got through playing softball last spring. Thank goodness that's over with. What happened to the size of that plate? Is it the same or is it different? It's the exact same. When you play Pee Wee baseball, moving on up, how big is the diamond? When you play high school ball, how big's the diamond? When you play college ball, how big's the diamond? When you play Major League Baseball, how big's the diamond? Let me appeal to you in this way. In baseball, a Major League professional player is held to the same exact standard as a Pee Wee player. When we have a chance to show Jesus to somebody in a classroom. And we compartmentalize our faith and leave it at the door. By the way, that's not faith. That's a hobby. We are being held to the same standard by Jesus when we're inside that classroom and when we're not. Does that make sense to everybody? I have learned over the years I cannot and will not compromise my Lord and Savior because somebody wrongly tells me I have to leave my faith at the door. Because God will judge me for the same things I don't say that I say. Let me give you an example. Have you all ever heard of somebody named Dietrich Bonhoeffer? We've talked quite a bit about him before. Dietrich Bonhoeffer is a fascinating man. In Germany, starting with Hitler's reign in 1926, was when he started his way up. Keep in mind, Hitler was elected, by the way. That always bothers me. The church endorsed Adolf Hitler. The church backed him. But there was one man named Dietrich Bonhoeffer who stood up against Adolf Hitler. And shortly after he started taking away their weapons and their rights, he started taking away their religious conscience, but he would tell them, relax, you still have your freedom of worship. When he started taking those things away, the church started grumbling. And Adolf Hitler called all the leaders of the church community up to his palace and fed them a big meal, showcased and just, hobnobbed with them. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer was one of them. And he was one of the only people in Germany to that point who did not endorse and did not agree with Adolf Hitler. After the dinner, everybody was sitting around, was standing up and fixing to leave and milling around. And one of the pastors said, "Mein Hitler, we are concerned about the spirit of our country." And the whole room split, and the man who made the comment was Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And they said Dietrich Bonhoeffer was standing eye to eye with Adolf Hitler. And he said it again, "Mein Hitler, I am concerned about the spirit of Germany." And Adolf Hitler looked at him and said, "Dear pastor, you let me worry about the spirit of Germany." 2 weeks before the United States came into Berlin, got to Berlin, Dietrich Bonhoeffer had already been put in a concentration camp, and he was ordered to be hanged 2 weeks before the Americans got there. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I want you to remember this quote. Dietrich Bonhoeffer gave one of the best quotes you'll ever hear. He said, "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. To not speak is to speak." I think we're heading to that part in our country. There's going to be a time, and it scares me. I had an opportunity to meet Paul Blair. Do y'all know who Paul Blair is? Yeah, I know very well. He's a remarkable pastor. And I had a chance to meet him one day, and Bill introduced him, and sometimes Bill starts talking me up to people I wish he wouldn't. And he started talking to that I teach the Constitution as it was meant to in the original intent and founders. And Paul Blair looked straight at me and said, "Well, when you get fired, come talk to me and we'll start a new school." And I didn't say a word. I didn't say a word to him. I thought, fired? It had never even crossed my mind that somebody might fire me for that. And I have stewed over that comment. He has no idea what he did to me that day. You know the song, "It Is Well"? The man who wrote that had lost his entire family at sea. And he wrote that song, "It Is Well With My Soul." When we were here a while back, I gave an altar call. God had been punishing me for not wanting to do it. That whole week I had said, "God, I am not a preacher. I am not a pastor. How do I give an altar call? I've never done that in my life." Dawn was just showing me pictures of it. There wasn't a raised head in the group. People are starting to understand that not to speak is to speak. And you and I may face the ultimate punishment one of these days. We may face Dietrich Bonhoeffer's punishment. And what I want you to think about today is, if that happened, would it be well with your soul? If you got fired for sharing and living your faith in school, would it be well in your soul? I've come to that place where I'm good with it. I know that God didn't just send us on the trip, He'll pay the whole way. And so you and I have a destiny with rendezvous, a rendezvous with destiny, and I think coming up we're going to see it pretty soon. I don't know about y'all, I have no faith in Donald Trump. He's our best hope, which scares me. But I don't see it happening. I don't see Hillary Clinton leaving anything to chance. If Hillary Clinton gave the order that no Christian will be allowed to ever share their faith, if she came down and said you are not allowed to have that Bible on your desk, what would you do? Does that make sense to everybody? We've got to kind of come to that place where we have to give it up. And I believe God will take care of every one of us.